Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the long anticipated return of the Naughty Seal podcast featuring Scotty and Neil. What do we do here? Well, we watch way too much hockey, we have far too strong opinions about it, and we've now decided once again to share them with all you very supportive people on the internet, because all of you are very kind. Neil, do you remember when we first started this show way back in the summer of 2013?
Is that when it was? It was 2013?
It was 2013. It was right before I moved to Saskatchewan.
I remember doing a couple podcasts and writing a couple articles is what I remember.
Ah, yes, the old Sports Network days. Good times for those of you with an internet time machine.
Yeah.
For those of you who don't know, Neil and I recorded about 4 or 5 episodes of the show via Skype, which was difficult to record on, and then, life got in the way. There have been 5 children born since the last episode of this show.
There have.
But enough about our personal lives. No one cares. You know what they do care about? They care about the Toronto Maple Leafs, Neil. You know what?
Yeah, they do.
I want to know what you think about the Vegas game Tuesday night. Tell me all about Vegas.
Okay, I'm going to start by giving my opinion on something, even though you already told me pre-show how we're going to do this somewhat. So I'm going to go off just for a second. Do you remember when Montreal traded Mikhail Sergachev for Jonathan Drouin?
Right? I remember that, and there were people saying that Montreal hosed them. It was just a prospect for a French-Canadian star who was thrilled to be in Montreal, signed a great contract.
Okay. Exactly. So then, I know you used to watch Tim and Sid a lot, like I did, right?
Oh, yes, not worthy. We are not worthy.
No. So I remember when the trade happened. I remember I'm paraphrasing somewhat because I don't remember word for word. It was a long time ago. But I remember Sid Seixeiro saying something to the effect of, don't let Jonathan Drouin's highlight reel fool you for what he is game in and game out. More or less saying, if you watch his highlight reel, you think he's the best player in the league. And not to say he wasn't going to be, but if you watch him game in, game out during a game, he's not that all the time.
Interesting take from the man who says the Calder Cup means nothing, which I disagreed with until I realized, oh my God, he's definitely right.
Yes, but my point is, comparably to what our main topic is supposed to be, that I find these Leafs are built a little bit like Jonathan Drouin. And they have been, not just this year, but for the past few years, where if you flip on the game for a couple minutes during a power play, or you watch a highlight reel of their goals, you think they're got to be the best team in the league. You know?
Oh, for sure. Night in, night out. You just watch them and like, oh yeah, I watch 5 minutes of every hockey game, and this is the greatest team in the history of the game.
Yes, and then to circle back to what we were supposed to talk about. I watched some of that Vegas game last night, or a few nights ago, and I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, Vegas is a north-south team that comes right at you. They're not in there trying to pretend they're something they're not. And they were forcing turnover after turnover after turnover after turnover. And yeah, when you see a few of the goals Toronto scores, or you happen to check the highlights at the end of the game, you're like, you know what, this was a close game. And Toronto did play well through periods of that game. But when you see what they seem to lack is that ability to jump on their opponent and just stomp on them and keep moving forward and do what Vegas was actually doing to them a lot of the game last night.
Yeah, the number of times a team with this much talent who scores this many goals wins by more than 2 is frighteningly abnormal. They let bad teams hang around, and then with good teams, well, yeah, I mean, you're not going to curb stomp Vegas. They've won 7 in a row. But you're right. No. They do have difficulty putting teams away. This playing up and down to their level of their opponents is just nauseating for the fan base.
Yes, it's frustrating, and and a lot of people, and you've heard it too, a lot of people say relax, we're only 13 games in now?
No, we are not 13 games in. We're like 7 years in.
That's exactly true. And I listen to the Dangle podcast all the time, and he says the same thing, as I'm sure you probably do as well. They talk about that. It isn't just one game or a group of games over the past little while. It's since they started losing their veterans, since they started playing Matthews, Marner, Nylander, signing Tavares. It's been the same type of thing, same style of play over and over again. And it just matters, you know? So.
And that's the frustrating thing. You know, what was think about the Randy Carlisle Leafs, if we can go really digress here. What they had was toughness and grit and a goalie and no scheme at all. Offense was, let's go try and score goals. And defense was, hey, I won the Norris Trophy. Defense is easy. Just figure it out. But what they had a lot of pieces.
Yeah.
But what they were missing was a premier first line center, a first pairing defenseman, a complementary center. Like these are the core pieces that are supposed to be hard to get. They're supposed to be easy to augment. They have the foundation. Are you telling me that the foundation itself is perhaps a softer footing than we would like?
I think now I don't know what Kyle Dubas and his group think, Shanahan and those guys, but I think that they really, based on, because they seem to use a lot of common sense, a lot of, well, analytic thinking, scientific thinking. They seem to, use facts to make all their decisions. Not a lot of their decisions are based on emotion, I don't think. And I think they really believed, and really based on what should have happened, believe they'd be operating with a lot more money to spend to augment that core.
I think we're all in agreement there. That was the case. But I mean, ultimately, you don't get to choose when the pandemic happens, and you don't get to choose when Count Gary Bettman tightens purse strings. It's just going to be what it's going to be. Now, that being said, growth from these players is what we expect. And, with Marner hitting or flirting with 100-point seasons and Matthews winning Rockets, this is the dream. It's you're right, though. I don't know how you would augment a lot better than they have. I mean, even with more money. So maybe, you hear the list of guys who've gone out the door, right? The own rentals, right? The Hymans, the Andersons, the Makheyevs, going back to Van Riemsdykes, the Bozaks. But ultimately, let's say the cap was $7 million higher. Like, let's not pretend like you're going to keep all of those guys. That's one guy. That's James Van Riemsdyk's salary. If the salary cap had continued to rise, it's not like that much more help was coming.
Yeah. No. I think now this could be my old school way of thinking, or what I've gotten used to watching over the years, but I feel like I was spoiled with a little bit of that Wendell Clark, Darcy Tucker, where like you saw them bleeding the blue and the white. They came out and they cared.
Bathe it on me. Just bathe it on me. It was wonderful. I just, you know what? I'm not going to give Damian Cox a lot of shout outs because I hate most of what he writes, but my God, did he write a good book about the spring of '93.
Yeah.
Going on about how that series uses it as like a metaphor for the changing NHL now that Gary was in charge. It starts with a line that Wendell Clark said, where he said he could stand at center ice with his eyes closed and tell you any building he was in, because apparently before the, sanitized modern corporate buildings, every one of them had a unique smell.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But no, you're right. I'm not sure where you find that, I think part of it, and God help me if I'm going to give the Boston Bruins props here, but every single player they bring in, that's a Bruin. Their management doesn't even seem to be on the page with that locker room, but that locker room is so strong. They fix all flaws. And what I don't know, because I tell you right now, the Leafs do not have that. What I don't know is how they get that. And I love bringing Tavares
culture
in.
thing.
Yeah, it is. And that's the question, is how do you build culture? Is it draft? Okay. I mean, how do you're going to build your future around an 18-year-old? That seems dicey at best. Is it bringing guys in? I think you'd be hard pressed to bring in a leader better than John Tavares, but ultimately you would think it comes top down, and it seems to be a group that, respects, but then the Boston Bruins throw that completely out the window because it's bottom up. It's locker room up to the front office. So here's me throwing my hands up saying, if they do this enough, eventually it's got to happen, right?
Yeah.
Even the Cubs won the World Series, Neil.
I know. Now, since you mentioned the Bruins, are we circling back to that afterwards?
Ooh, you know what? No, we're going to do it now. We're going to do it now. This show's already in the blender.
Okay, I kind of figured so. That's kind of what
Talk to
you
me
and I
about the
do.
Boston Bruins, Neil.
Okay, so in a nutshell, everybody knows what's going on with Mitchell Miller. I would have to say that what I think, and this is just my opinion, I didn't read anything or hear anything, I think is what this team of management and ownership or whoever was involved, I got to believe Jeremy Jacobs is involved in a lot of things. He's a pretty powerful man. Is they decided once again, like a lot of teams do in these type of situations, to prioritize winning over the quality of the human being and the people that has been affected by something. And I think they hoped that they'd make this signing, it would kind of fly under the radar, nobody would notice, and then they would just pluck this really good player, similarly to how Montreal did with that Lemieux, except a much lesser issue. Well, somewhat lesser issue.
Different issue. Let's go with different.
We'll call it a different issue. And I think they thought that it was just going to fly under the radar and they were going to land this gem. And clearly people noticed. And, clearly they're all backtracking. And now.
Have you ever heard an NHL player say that a signing was tough to swallow? I mean, they'll sometimes complain about their buddies going out the door, but hockey culture is no, man. No, thou shalt not criticize thy general manager.
It's one of those things, kind of like you said about the character of Boston. It's hard as a Leaf fan. The years, but when you see the way they carry themselves, and I see now why they signed Nick Foligno, the same reason I wanted that to go better when he played the handful of games in Toronto.
It was what they needed. It was what they needed.
It was what they needed, and you can see the character, the way they respect the process in that room, the culture in that room, and they, like, I would say the closest thing I've ever heard, because me, I got a pretty good memory for weird little things that happen in sports. Is I remember after Subban left Montreal, somebody asked Gallagher a question, and he said something along the lines of, "Well, he's going to make it about him like he always does," which I found very peculiar.
Yes, he did.
And I remember the famous Dion Phaneuf one with Sean Avery. Sean Avery with Dion Phaneuf. I remember. I don't know if it was that situation. Was he in Dallas when that happened?
Well, so Dallas signed him to a pretty substantial contract for the era, and then he made the sloppy seconds comment, and then all of a sudden Dallas said, "Well, he's unplayable." But yes, because Marty
Turco. No, because Marty Turco actually made a comment in the media about Sean Avery, and I remember thinking that just does not happen in hockey.
Never.
No. So to circle back to hear Nick Foligno and Patrice Bergeron and some of that leadership course say what they said, like, is it, especially Bergeron, like, and Foligno, like, just class acts, is it not even harder to dislike those guys, even if they're on the team that is the ghost?
Oh my God. Like, based on what I just saw, Bergeron might have Cam Neely's job next year. Like, really?
Yeah. Well, and really based on the choices that Neely and co just made, should they even have a job after?
I've got to think that starts with Jeremy Jacobs. I don't know.
We live in a time where everybody has to be uber aware of the things they're saying, the actions they're making, what they're doing it for, why they're doing these things. Everybody's being held more accountable now than they ever have before, and a lot of it, it's positive, And to think that in times like this, a decision like that is still made by a bunch of highly paid professional management people, it's just, I don't understand.
Can I actually jump in here with the scariest part of this entire signing, and a little news that came out about something else after, that Gary Bettman can just arbitrarily say, well, no, he's not eligible to play in the NHL. Where's that in the collective bargaining agreement that I don't even want to call him commissioner, but like the supreme overlord of professional hockey in North America has to like give you the whole, I bless you, son, welcome to the National Hockey League.
Well, did you hear what he said?
That's terrifying. What if some guy in junior's like, well, you know what, I was thinking about going to the NHL, but that Gary guy, I don't know. And then all of a sudden, well, no, you do not qualify for the National Hockey League. And they asked about it in Winnipeg recently. Someone, oh God, I really wish I'd caught his name in the press conference. They asked Gary, they said, how is this different than the Logan Mailloux draft? And he said, well, Logan's not eligible to play in the NHL either. And I'm like, that's news.
Yeah.
Does Jeff Molson know that?
Did you hear the way it was explained?
I did. Go ahead though.
I forget where I was hearing that. It might have been Dangle again, because those guys are pretty on top of their shit all the time.
Well, they also have about 30 hours a week of content.
And they're fantastic. But it was something along the lines of a team is able to sign whomever they choose to sign. Boston in particular, for this example, contractually nothing wrong. I'm not saying,
right. No, we're being contract about this.
Yeah. If we're talking contract and CBA and business wise, they did absolutely nothing wrong. And then the NHL is saying we can also decide if a player is eligible to even play in the NHL once they are a player in the NHL.
Which is wild. Like, does the PA know? I mean, I know that they're somewhat of an impotent organization at best, but I gotta feel like someone in, Donald Fear's office is sitting there thinking, can Gary do that? And they're flipping through the rule book right now, and they're flipping through the CBA. And the National Hockey League has this wonderful history of just making stuff up on the spot and then be like, no, this is part of the spirit of the is it? Let's bring it back about Sean Avery. Let's make this the Sean Avery podcast. Remember, he's swinging in front of Brodeur. All of a sudden, that's unsportsmanlike conduct. Oh,
well, don't you think? Now,
that's
don't you think so?
But cross-checking a guy in the back 1,000 times until he moves from the front of your net is very sportsmanlike.
Yes, because it depends on what they're looking to do, right?
Right.
But you want to take that even a step further to your point. So, don't you think the owners who have GMs underneath them, right, say to Gary Bettman, so you're telling me that you're going to allow me to sign somebody and spend money that technically should be on the cap, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like Boston should be hit with the cap.
He should be on the cap.
To then tell me after the fact that I can't use this player.
Right. And Boston playing enough cap shenanigans this year. Like, what was Bergeron's performance bonus? Like, play 10 games and gets $4 million or something?
Yeah, but I don't understand why that matters, right? Because it comes off next year's cap.
Comes off next year's cap. Yeah, this is last dance territory, right?
Is that how it is? It comes off the next year's cap or something?
If you are 35 plus, you are eligible to sign bonuses. Only ELCs and 35 plus contracts can have bonuses. And they made his basically, can you tie your own skates?
Yeah.
So his salary is like $2 million, and I think Krejci's is a little less, something like that. And same thing, he's bonus laden too. Like, I think they're going to get about $6 million in cap overage next year.
They're not doing very good. They're 13-2. They suck.
They're terrible. It was not worth it. They should have just tore it down this year. They're just horrible. What is this having two goalies nonsense? If you have two, you don't have one. Get out of here. You want to make a hard pivot here?
And what? And Krejci goes to play back for a year? Huh?
Nonsense. But
Krejci goes home for a year. Comes back.
Speaking of overseas, how touching was it to have Boreas Salming back in the house the last two nights there, Friday and Saturday night? I mean, I feel like I'm wearing sunglasses so no one sees that I'm dying inside watching that. Oh my God. You can't put old men crying on TV and then expect me to have no emotional reaction. I'm not a Toronto Maple Leaf. They might not have cared. This guy cared.
I don't know, man. That was one of those things. I think the older you get, the more, not the more sensitive you get, but the more in tune with how you feel, I guess. And, I remember seeing Daryl Sittler and Boreas Salming at the arena on TV many times over the years. And they both look basically the same, like same cognitive ability, same everything.
Yeah.
And then to see that in the Friday night game, and to see
Daryl's hand up like that, like, oh God.
Yeah. And to see Daryl Sittler just balling and see Sundin kind of trying to hold it in, like, it was pretty emotional for sure.
Yeah.
For sure, it was pretty emotional.
Oh.
And
you know what, Boreas, I heard so much about that they had this great player in the 70s and the 80s. I mean, I didn't watch hockey before 1993, so I have never seen him with my own eyes. Only a handful of those flashback games they used to show on Leafs TV.
Yeah.
But, it almost feels like a disservice to franchise history that, he never got to win a Stanley Cup because he played for such a miserable owner. But so many people just don't know enough about. I mean, this guy is still the all-time leader in assists for the Leafs. all-time points leader for defensemen, all-time games played by a defenseman. I think only George Armstrong's played more games in a Leafs uniform.
And
unbelievable.
And one of the biggest things to me, I find I've noticed more as I've gotten older, is when you hear their peers talk about players.
Yes.
To me, that carries more weight than almost any other statistic or anything can. And you hear anybody talk about Salming, and that's even before he was sick. Because, when people get sick, you do hear a lot of that.
Yeah. Oh, he was so great.
Yeah.
But was he?
And not to say that he wasn't or anything like that. It's just usually people, the positive emotions and the positive vibes come out when somebody's sick. But when you hear players that have played alongside him and against him over the years all say the same stuff, because I didn't have the fortune, I wasn't fortunate enough to watch him play either. But you hear what you hear. It's sorry to jump across topics, but even there's so many people that still just don't think Austin Matthews is the real deal or isn't as good as because he's in Toronto. When you hear somebody like John Tavares, who's 1 goal shy of 400,
one goal shy of 400, still parked there,
and has over 900 points in his career, or whatever he has.
Very good hockey player.
First of all, he's another guy that gets underrated and treated a little shitty sometimes. But when you hear him say, in 50 games, it might not have been 50 to start the year, but like, do you understand how hard that is to do? Or you hear other players in the league go, like Austin Matthews just scored 6.
He's a unicorn. Like, that's an actual unicorn.
Crazy. Like, that's other NHL players. Yeah, that's other NHL players saying that. Guys that do it too,
Like, so, the number of guys who scored 60 goals since Yager won the Art Ross in like 7 or something. Yeah. I think it's 3. I think it's Matthews, Stamkos, Ovechkin, definitely the only 3 in the post-lockout era. I think it's possible Pavel Bure got one there in the late 90s.
Pavel Bure got one. I think Pavel Bure had 59 one year and 60-something the year after playing in Florida, eh?
Yeah, something like that. Like, I know he had a 60 or so in Vancouver. I feel like he had one last run of it there playing under Mike Keenan. Oh my God, I'll never forget this. I'm a young boy watching Sports Desk, you see, and they're talking about Pavel Bure, and he doesn't back check. And Mike Keenan says, I don't want that guy playing in his own end. He should be hanging out at the red line going for breakaways. He's a superstar. People can't do what he can do. We're going to hard pivot here again from memory lane. The Leafs have 3 games coming up this week. Tuesday at Pittsburgh. Thursday, home to the absolute wagon New Jersey Devils. And finally, Hockey Night in Canada, back at the bank to play the Sabres, who are, you know what? I'm still not a believer, but that's not... Even last year, they couldn't beat them, and they were terrible. So that's a bit of a nightmare scenario, actually.
Well, I think a couple things need to happen because I still see a ton of holes in this team's game. Pittsburgh seems to be a real good matchup for Toronto this year for some reason in the little sample size that we got.
Yep.
A very motivated Evgeny Malkin doesn't help the cause for the Leafs here at all. But,
don't poke the bear.
No, but I think Pitt's going to be a challenge for them for sure. They seem to have a hard time. Like, they just didn't look like they could handle I don't know if it's that winning pedigree or the veteran presence, but like, I didn't think Toronto should look so slow against a team like Pittsburgh.
Yeah. I mean, Pittsburgh, for all the skill they have, it's pretty hard to call them a fast team these days. I mean, that core's been together for nearly 2 decades.
And they didn't look slow next to Toronto, right? Like that.
No. I worry that the Leafs. I worry sometimes cap wise, team wise. Pittsburgh is, I think, their model. Like, okay, we're going to spend money on, 2 big centers and 1 defenseman, and we'll figure it out from there. But the problem is, it's not Sidney Crosby.
Yeah. Well, I think Crosby brings a lot of stuff to the game still that'll guys never will, and
all right, what's a good week look like here?
It's almost like the world.
All right, so they got Penguins.
Sorry,
Devils,
I'm getting off topic.
Yeah, Penguins, Devils, Sabres. We got 3 games. What's a good record look like when we talk again Sunday?
Honestly, I think if they come out of this 2-1, I think we'll be lucky. I just I don't find they got the mojo going. I'd say 2-1 is the best case scenario.
It feels very 1-1, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. It does.
Yeah, you watch. They'll they just lost to Pittsburgh, so that feels like the overtime loss. Let's pencil that one as the overtime loss. We don't want them winning too many games in a row here. New Jersey is the best team in the Eastern Conference, so we're just going to go ahead and put a win beside that one, yeah?
Yeah,
And
that
then,
sounds about right.
Buffalo, Hockey Night in Canada against the team they should beat, so we're going to go 4-2 Sabres, yeah?
Yeah, I could. Yeah, I don't know. The Leafs do things the Leaf way. I can't disagree with anything you're saying. I trying to stay on topic. It's hard for me. There's so many things. I think once they hear the actual outcome on Jake Muzzin, that might change how this team looks a little bit.
We'll see. I do feel like a decision needs to be made there. It wasn't made in the summer. It hasn't been made yet. I know they're waiting around to see what's going on with his neck or his back or what have you. But I think the clock is ticking, and like, you got to make a decision for him soon, because you could Robidas Island him. You could give him the Lupul treatment. I know the Leafs don't like anymore to do that. They like to do right by the player, etc. But I think doing right by Jake Muzzin right now is keeping him off the ice and writing him a big fat check.
Yes. So what is, and I know you can easily say 0-3. That's not what I'm looking for here. What is worst case scenario for this team coming out of this trip? Like 1-2, but
worst case scenario is they lose another goalie.
Okay, well, I mean, I think
worst case scenario is they only get points in one game. They got to get points in at least 2 games.
But here's the thing: they're already a somewhat fragile group. You can still kind of see it, even though they're kind of fighting to stay above it. So let's say they come out of this trip 1-2, but they don't really play great in any of the games. Let's say they don't play really well in the game they win, and they play decent and lose the other couple because they've been doing that this year. They're getting to a point where
that's so Leafy.
But they're getting to a point where how do you come back from that?
All right. Well, we're going to wrap it up here, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining us once again here on the Naughty Seal podcast. Be sure to like, be sure to subscribe, tell all your friends. We are here for a good time, not a long time.
Thanks.